Emma's evening began like any other, quiet and routine, with the soft hum of the city outside her window and the scent of fresh bread lingering in the kitchen. She had just finished setting the table for dinner when a sudden knock at the door startled her, a sound that seemed louder than it should have in the otherwise calm house. Peering through the peephole, she froze for a moment, seeing the familiar yet unexpected face of Margaret, her mother-in-law, holding a basket of warm cookies, smiling like she had a secret no one else knew. Emma's heart skipped. Margaret rarely visited without notice, and her sudden appearance carried a mix of warmth and tension that made Emma's stomach flutter. She opened the door politely, masking the swirl of curiosity and unease inside her. "We thought we'd surprise you," Margaret said, her voice calm but teasing, as if daring Emma to notice the subtle intensity behind her smile. As she stepped inside, the house seemed to shift, the air heavier, charged with an unspoken energy that made Emma slightly dizzy. Margaret moved around naturally, placing her basket on the counter, glancing at the furniture, and settling into the living room with a confidence that reminded Emma why she sometimes felt a little off balance around her. They exchanged small talk at first, weather, errands, and David's schedule, but beneath the casual conversation, there were glances that lingered, tiny smiles that hinted at emotions unspoken, a subtle tension Emma couldn't quite name. She noticed how Margaret's eyes seemed to meet hers for just a second longer than polite, the way she laughed slightly too warmly at something ordinary, the soft sway of her hand as she gestured while telling a story. Emma tried to focus on normal things, pouring tea, arranging cookies on a plate, keeping her voice steady, but the feeling of closeness and unexpected intimacy was creeping in, curling around her thoughts and making her pulse quicken. David's absence added a layer of quiet unease. He had stepped out for a business call, leaving Emma alone with Margaret in the heart of their home. The silence between their conversations became almost comforting, yet charged, like the calm before a storm, making Emma hyper-aware of each movement Margaret made. She caught herself watching Margaret more than she intended, noticing the curve of her smile, the slight tilt of her head when she listened, the warmth that radiated from her presence in a way that was oddly compelling. Emma tried to remind herself that Margaret was family, that boundaries existed, but something in the way Margaret spoke, leaned forward slightly on the couch, or let her fingers brush lightly against the basket as she reached for a cookie, created a strange, magnetic tension. They laughed together over shared memories of David's childhood, stories he had told them, moments that should have felt simple but instead pulled them closer emotionally, making Emma feel a mix of nostalgia and an unexpected, complex longing she didn't fully understand. The clock ticked on, unnoticed, while Margaret's presence seemed to fill the room, her voice soft, comforting, yet teasing in a way that made Emma's heart beat faster, a cocktail of warmth, curiosity, and tension. Every word Margaret spoke seemed layered with meaning, casual at first, then dipping into observations about life, choices, loneliness, and love, leaving Emma captivated, listening intently, hanging on every phrase, feeling a connection that was gentle but undeniable. The rain outside began, lightly at first, pattering against the windows, adding a quiet, intimate rhythm that made the living room feel like a world apart from the busy streets outside. Emma realized she was noticing every detail about Margaret, the way she shifted on the couch, the subtle change in her tone when speaking about memories, the way her eyes seemed to look right through her at times, not in a judgmental way, but as if recognizing emotions Emma herself hadn't admitted. The room, normally familiar, felt different. Under Margaret's presence, smaller yet more expansive in emotional energy, making Emma feel both safe and restless at the same time. She tried to focus on arranging the cookies neatly, making polite conversation, but each laugh, each glance, each pause held a tension that tightened around her chest. Emma felt herself drawn into Margaret's orbit, compelled by a combination of affection, intrigue, and unspoken connection. The simple act of sitting across from her on the couch, sharing tea, and exchanging stories became layered with emotional undercurrents neither of them addressed openly. Margaret's smile lingered, soft but knowing, as if she sensed Emma's fluttering heart, her curiosity, her awareness of a subtle bond forming in the quiet moments they shared. Emma tried to stay grounded in reality, reminding herself of her role, her marriage, her life's boundaries, but the emotional closeness Margaret brought into the room was undeniable, creating a tension that was thrilling yet confusing. They moved from small talk into more personal territory, discussing ambitions, regrets, and the small heartbreaks of everyday life, creating a fragile intimacy that felt both comforting and dangerous. The room seemed to shrink, the outside world fading as their conversation deepened, each word and gesture building an emotional bridge that neither Emma nor Margaret had intended but could not resist. By the time David returned, Emma felt a swirl of emotions she had never anticipated: confusion, curiosity, warmth, and a subtle, unnameable longing. The moment left her heart racing, her mind spinning, and a soft realization settling in that Margaret's presence had opened a door she hadn't known existed in her own life, a door filled with connection, subtle tension, and emotional complexity. Emma knew that this unexpected visit was only the beginning of something that could shape the days to come, a fragile dance of feelings that had quietly started on a rainy evening, with cookies, laughter, and glances that spoke volumes without a single word. And as the door closed behind David, Emma caught Margaret's knowing smile again, the silent understanding between them lingering in the air, leaving her to wonder how ordinary visits could suddenly feel so extraordinary and emotionally charged. Days passed after Margaret's unexpected visit, and Emma couldn't shake the strange energy that had settled over the house, a quiet tension that lingered even when life seemed normal. She tried to focus on her routine, cooking, tidying, and waiting for David to return from work, but every time she walked into the living room, memories of Margaret's smile and the warmth of her presence tugged at her thoughts. The air in the house felt heavier somehow, charged with unspoken words and the silent pull of connection that Emma hadn't anticipated. One rainy afternoon, while David was caught in back-to-back meetings, Emma found herself alone again in the living room, the soft gray light from the clouds filtering through the curtains, casting everything in a gentle glow. Margaret had come over again, this time with no reason other than to visit, and the atmosphere was intimate but calm, quiet enough that the world outside seemed distant. They started with casual conversation, talking about errands, books they were reading, and the changing seasons, but slowly the talk drifted to more personal territory, brushing lightly against emotions, past experiences, and the subtle loneliness that sometimes came with adult life. Emma noticed how natural it was to talk to Margaret in this way, how easy it felt to share a laugh, a thought, or a worry, and yet every word carried an undertone of something deeper, something unspoken that hovered just beneath the surface. They shared stories about David from his younger days, laughing at the little habits he had, the things that annoyed him, the things that made him endearing, and Emma felt a closeness she hadn't expected, a bridge forming between her and Margaret that was emotional rather than physical, yet impossible to ignore. Margaret's voice was soft, warm, and steady, and Emma realized that every glance, every small gesture, like a hand resting near her own on the couch or a tilt of the head while listening, was sending ripples through her emotions, leaving her heart fluttering in ways she wasn't used to. The rain outside grew stronger, filling the room with the quiet rhythm of pattering drops, and it seemed to intensify the feeling of isolation, of a little world shared only between them. Emma felt a strange mixture of comfort and tension, a gentle pull toward Margaret that was complicated and confusing, yet impossible to dismiss. Their laughter grew more personal, more sincere, and at one point, a memory from years ago led to a brief, accidental touch of hands, fingers brushing lightly as they reached for the same mug. The contact was fleeting but enough to send a shiver through Emma's chest, an unexpected surge of emotion she hadn't planned to feel. Margaret's eyes met hers, calm and knowing, and Emma realized that something unspoken had passed between them, a quiet recognition of a connection that neither of them had fully named but both felt clearly. Emma tried to ground herself, reminding herself of boundaries and the life she had with David, but the emotional intimacy was undeniable, pulling her into a space where words were only part of the story, where glances and shared moments carried more weight than anything spoken aloud. Time seemed to stretch, the rain outside keeping the world at bay while they sat together, talking about dreams, disappointments, love lost, and hope for the future, building an invisible thread that tied their emotions together in a way that was tender, gentle, and profoundly moving. Emma realized that she was laughing more freely, listening more intently, and feeling more fully than she had in weeks, caught up in a wave of emotional closeness she hadn't anticipated but welcomed secretly. Margaret's presence was magnetic yet respectful, drawing Emma in with warmth, attention, and understanding, while never overstepping, creating a delicate balance of intimacy and propriety that made every interaction feel charged, yet safe. The room seemed smaller, cozier, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to listen to their shared stories, the hum of the city outside replaced by the quiet murmur of rain, laughter, and words dipped in longing and gentle connection. Emma noticed herself leaning in slightly when Margaret spoke, drawn to the kindness, the attentiveness, the way her mother-in-law seemed to understand emotions without being asked, as if seeing into parts of her that Emma herself had kept hidden. The afternoon stretched on, their conversations dipping into moments of vulnerability, Emma admitting fears, Margaret recalling moments of heartbreak, and in those moments, the air between them vibrated with emotional resonance, leaving Emma both exhilarated and uneasy. There was an honesty in the way Margaret listened, the way she nodded, the way her eyes softened at the right moments, that made Emma feel seen, understood, and quietly admired. At one point, Emma laughed at a story Margaret shared from her youth, and the sound of laughter seemed to linger in the room, echoing softly against the walls, a reminder of how unexpectedly alive and connected this moment made her feel. And then, as if noticing the tension building, Margaret shifted slightly on the couch, turning her body subtly toward Emma, eyes bright, voice warm but lower, the rain outside making their shared space feel private, intimate, and fragile. Emma felt her pulse quicken again, a mixture of excitement, wonder, and cautious hesitation. Every glance, every word, every shared smile seemed to carry layers of emotion neither fully named, creating a slow-burning tension that was emotional, romantic, yet completely clean and respectful. Emma realized with a quiet startle that she was drawn to Margaret's presence in ways that went beyond simple family affection, that the emotional pull between them was strong, surprising, and impossible to ignore, yet it remained in the realm of subtle, unspoken longing. The day passed almost unnoticed, the rain tapering off outside, leaving a fresh, damp smell in the air and a quiet calm that contrasted with the emotional storm within Emma's heart. As Margaret prepared to leave, giving Emma a warm hug and a knowing glance that neither of them fully acknowledged, Emma felt a mixture of relief and disappointment, a quiet ache that the shared moments were ending, yet a strange comfort in the knowledge that the connection had been felt, real, and unforgettable. The door closed behind Margaret with a soft click, leaving Emma alone with her thoughts, heart still fluttering, mind spinning with emotions she hadn't anticipated. She knew that something had shifted, that her feelings were more complicated than she wanted to admit, and that the quiet moments shared with Margaret had left an imprint she couldn't erase. Emma sat on the couch long after Margaret had gone, staring at the space where she had been, feeling a mixture of longing, curiosity, and the slow realization that life had become unexpectedly complicated in a way that was emotional, profound, and beautifully dramatic. She understood that boundaries were still important, that nothing had changed in reality, but in her heart, a subtle door had opened, filled with emotions that would not be ignored, leaving her to wonder how ordinary days could suddenly hold so much tension, intimacy, and quiet magic. And she realized with a mix of excitement and apprehension that this was only the beginning of a story that would continue to unfold in surprising and emotionally charged ways. The house felt unusually quiet one evening, a calm that wrapped around Emma and Margaret as if the world outside had vanished, leaving only the soft hum of the heater and the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath their feet. David was away on an extended business trip, leaving Emma alone with Margaret for several hours, and the absence of any other presence created a space that felt private, almost suspended in time. They sat together in the living room, a soft golden glow from the lamp illuminating their faces, making the space feel warmer, smaller, and somehow more intimate than usual. The conversation started casually, touching on books, favorite movies, and the small joys of life, but slowly, effortlessly, it drifted into deeper topics, dreams that had faded, regrets that lingered quietly, and the small, unspoken fears that both women carried. Margaret shared a story about her youth, a memory of a love lost and lessons learned, her voice soft, measured, and full of quiet emotion, while Emma listened, captivated not just by the words but by the way Margaret expressed them, the subtleties of her tone, the way her eyes seemed to shine with a mixture of vulnerability and strength. Emma felt herself leaning in, drawn to Margaret's presence in a way that surprised her, a magnetic pull that was emotional and profound, yet completely respectful, filling the room with an energy that neither of them needed to name out loud. They laughed at shared jokes and smiled at little observations about life, each moment building a bridge between them that was tender, gentle, and rich with meaning. At one point, Margaret shifted slightly on the couch, her body angled toward Emma in a natural, unforced way, and Emma felt a warmth that was both comforting and new, a quiet stirring of connection that she hadn't anticipated. Words became almost secondary as they exchanged stories from their past, their voices dipping into tones of empathy, understanding, and subtle longing. Emma noticed the small details, the way Margaret's hand rested near her own when reaching for a mug, the tilt of her head when listening intently, the soft pauses that invited Emma to speak from the heart. The rain outside began, tapping gently against the windows, adding a rhythmic backdrop that made the living room feel like a small sanctuary, a space where nothing else mattered except the emotional connection unfolding between them. Emma's heart raced with a mixture of excitement and caution, her mind aware of boundaries but her emotions swept along by the gentle tide of shared vulnerability and laughter. They discussed dreams for the future, hopes they had for themselves and for the people they loved, each sentence carrying a weight that went beyond words, a subtle intimacy that left Emma both exhilarated and thoughtful. Margaret's eyes met hers across the couch more than once, a silent understanding passing between them, acknowledging the depth of the moment without breaking the decorum that defined their relationship. Emma felt a surge of admiration and fondness, a quiet thrill at being seen so completely, a recognition of emotions that she herself hadn't fully understood until now. Time seemed to stretch and contract simultaneously, the afternoon slipping into evening, the room bathed in the soft glow of the lamp, punctuated by the muted sounds of rain and the occasional distant car passing by. Each glance, each shared smile, each gentle laugh wove a tapestry of connection, subtle and emotionally charged, leaving Emma aware of the fragile, beautiful thread tying their hearts together in that small room. Margaret shared a personal memory that was tender, tinged with regret, and Emma responded with empathy, her own stories spilling out naturally, creating a dance of emotions that was gentle, honest, and profoundly moving. The air between them felt electric but controlled, charged with unspoken understanding, the kind of closeness that only emerges when two people allow themselves to be completely present with one another. Emma realized that her emotions were shifting, that the bond she felt with Margaret was growing stronger, deeper, more nuanced, and yet entirely clean, a connection rooted in shared vulnerability, respect, and emotional resonance. Laughter mixed with quiet moments of reflection, stories gave way to thoughtful pauses, and in those silences, Emma felt a closeness that words could not capture, a warmth that filled her chest and left her thinking about Margaret long after a single glance or phrase. At one point, Margaret brushed her fingers lightly against a cushion, close to Emma's hand, and the brief contact sent a subtle shiver of awareness through Emma, not of desire in a physical sense, but of the emotional intensity that these moments carried. The rain grew heavier, drumming gently against the windows, creating a private cocoon around them, a world where only their voices, laughter, and shared emotions existed. Emma noticed how natural it felt to be open, to share fears and joys, to speak freely without pretense, and how Margaret seemed to understand and accept her fully, a rare and precious experience that left Emma both grateful and introspective. Stories turned into confessions, small admissions of loneliness and longing, and Emma realized that this connection was unique, one that would leave a lasting impression, a gentle but undeniable mark on her heart. Every detail mattered, the tone of Margaret's voice, the subtle warmth in her smile, the way she listened without judgment, the careful consideration in her gestures, all creating an emotional intimacy that was deep, meaningful, and completely appropriate. Time became almost irrelevant as they shared moments that felt suspended, each second weighted with understanding, humor, reflection, and mutual recognition of the unusual closeness forming between them. As evening turned into night, Emma felt a mixture of awe, curiosity, and a quiet excitement at the realization that some connections were meant to exist on the level of emotion, intellect, and empathy, powerful and moving without crossing into anything inappropriate. Margaret finally stood, stretching gently, and offered Emma a soft, meaningful glance that spoke volumes without words, acknowledging the shared hours, the quiet laughter, the depth of conversation, and the tender, unspoken understanding that had woven itself into their hearts. Emma watched her mother-in-law move to the door, feeling a soft ache that the time had ended, yet comforted by the knowledge that this emotional bond was real, lasting, and profoundly moving, and that moments like these could exist quietly, beautifully, and meaningfully without disrupting the fabric of life. The door closed behind Margaret with a gentle click, leaving Emma on the couch, heart still racing, mind alive with thoughts, aware that she had experienced something rare and deeply emotional, an innocent but powerful intimacy that would shape her feelings, reflections, and understanding of human connection in ways she hadn't anticipated, and as she sat there listening to the rain taper off outside, she knew that this was only the beginning of a story that would continue to unfold with emotional depth, subtle tension, and quietly profound revelations about longing, connection, and the complexity of human hearts. The next day, the house seemed quieter than usual, almost holding its breath, as if it, too, sensed the weight of unspoken emotions between Emma and Margaret. Emma tried to go about her morning routine, preparing breakfast and tidying the kitchen, but her mind kept drifting back to the previous day's conversations, the gentle warmth, the laughter, the quiet moments where glances and words had carried more meaning than either had dared to say aloud. Margaret lingered longer than usual, and Emma noticed the subtle changes in her tone, the soft attentiveness in her eyes, the way she moved around the house with a calm confidence that made Emma simultaneously comfortable and alert, as if every gesture carried a message meant only for her. They found themselves sharing another cup of tea in the living room, and the world outside the window faded, leaving only the two of them, their voices blending, flowing naturally from casual chatter into deeper reflections about life, dreams, and the small regrets that everyone carries silently. Emma realized that she had begun to anticipate these visits, to feel a quiet joy at Margaret's presence, a mixture of admiration, warmth, and emotional closeness that was new, tender, and profoundly affecting. Margaret's stories became more personal, revealing lessons she had learned through love, loss, and the passage of time, and Emma listened intently, feeling a connection that went beyond friendship or familial courtesy, a bond rooted in empathy, understanding, and shared emotional experiences. At one point, they sat together on the couch, the rain outside pattering lightly against the windows, creating a rhythm that made the living room feel like a sanctuary where no one else could intrude. Margaret spoke softly about vulnerability, about the courage it took to express feelings honestly, and Emma found herself sharing thoughts she had never voiced aloud, confessions of insecurities, quiet hopes, and reflections on her own life, feeling safe and understood in a way that was rare and moving. Every glance, every smile, every subtle gesture, The way Margaret's hand rested near hers, the tilt of her head as she listened, the gentle laugh that punctuated her stories, carried layers of emotion that filled the room, creating a gentle intimacy that was entirely clean yet emotionally charged. Emma felt her pulse quicken, not from fear or mischief, but from the intensity of connection, the awareness that two people could understand each other so completely without needing to cross boundaries, that emotions could be rich, complex, and heartfelt while remaining wholly respectful. They discussed past experiences with honesty, shared reflections on mistakes and lessons learned, and in every exchange, there was a sense of trust, of being fully seen, that left Emma both exhilarated and contemplative. Time passed unnoticed, marked only by the changing light through the curtains and the soft ticking of the clock, while their conversation carried them through laughter, thoughtful pauses, and moments of quiet acknowledgement, building an invisible bond that Emma knew would remain with her long after Margaret left. When Emma admitted some of her fears and disappointments, Margaret responded not with judgment, but with gentle reassurance, a calm empathy that made Emma feel safe, understood, and quietly cherished. They explored shared values and dreams for the future, moments of vulnerability and hope intertwining, leaving Emma aware of a powerful emotional connection that was tender, respectful, and profound. At one point, Margaret leaned slightly closer, a gesture that was subtle yet deliberate, and Emma felt a flutter in her chest, a realization that such closeness could be deeply moving without being inappropriate, that emotional intimacy alone could carry weight, warmth, and meaning. They laughed over stories of David, their shared memories creating a comfortable rhythm, while softer moments of reflection brought a gentle ache of awareness, the sense that they had stumbled into something rare, a pure, profound understanding between two people. Emma found herself smiling more freely, speaking more openly, her heart lighter yet full of a complicated tenderness she had not expected to feel. Margaret, in turn, responded with warmth, encouragement, and a quiet joy at sharing these moments, each gesture, glance, and word reinforcing the trust and bond between them. The rain continued, a soft soundtrack to their quiet conversations, and Emma realized that the emotional resonance of the past few days had changed her perspective, leaving her with a deeper appreciation for empathy, connection, and the subtleties of human emotion. When the afternoon slowly gave way to evening, Margaret prepared to leave, and Emma felt a gentle pang at the thought of the separation, but also a comfort in knowing that the connection was real, enduring in memory if not constantly in presence. They exchanged a long, meaningful glance, a soft smile, and a quiet acknowledgement of the emotions they had shared, without words, without crossing lines, but with a full understanding that this bond was special, unique, and profoundly human. As the door closed behind Margaret, the familiar click seemed to mark both an ending and a beginning, the end of that afternoon, yet the beginning of a lasting awareness in Emma's heart of the power of emotional intimacy, of trust, and of the quiet ways people can touch each other's lives. Emma sat on the couch, reflecting on the moments of laughter, honesty, and gentle connection, realizing that she had been part of something extraordinary, not in a dramatic sense, but in the quiet, subtle, deeply human sense that leaves a mark on one's soul. She thought about the lessons Margaret had shared, the warmth she had felt in those small hours of conversation, and how these moments had opened a new understanding of relationships, boundaries, and the beauty of pure emotional resonance. Emma understood that love and connection could take many forms, that bonds did not always need to be romantic or physical to be powerful, and that the depth of understanding between two people could be profoundly moving, even life-changing. She smiled softly, feeling gratitude for the trust, the empathy, and the shared emotional journey, knowing that such moments were rare and precious, leaving her heart full, her mind reflective, and her spirit quietly uplifted. And as she listened to the last drops of rain against the window, Emma felt a sense of closure, not sadness, but a recognition that some connections exist to be felt, cherished, and remembered, emotional and romantic in their depth, yet entirely respectful, leaving a lasting impression that would influence her understanding of human intimacy and the delicate power of heartfelt connection for years to come.